when no one's really watching, no one's zooming into your every act. How you act during those times, that really reveals what a big person you are.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rabbi Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Avracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Chayei Sarah, hidden in a famous scene is a concept that Rabbi Frand is able to dig out. It's the same concept Rabbi Dessler speaks about at length, and I want to share it with you. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos lists Avram's 10 famous nisyonos, 10 tests that he went through during his lifetime. Most commentaries agree that what we had last week's Parsha, the Akeidah, that was the climax and the peak of all the 10 nisyonos. That's the number one, when Avram was asked to sacrifice his own son. However, Rabbeinu Yonah disagrees, and he says that this week's Parsha contains the 10th test, which was purchasing the Cave of Machpelah for Sarah to be buried. The test was that Avram had to buy land that Hashem promised him it's his anyways, for eternal. And yet he had to negotiate with Frand and paid a crazy inflated price, and he never once complained. That, says Rabbeinu Yonah, was the final test. The obvious question is, the Akeidah involved life and death, an ultimate sacrifice after he was told his whole continuation is going to be through Yitzchak. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking him to sacrifice Yitzchak? How does that work? That's huge. As opposed to a real estate transaction, what's the comparison? How can Rabbeinu Yonah fathom that this is the epitome of all the 10 tests? Rabbi Frand wants to say an amazing idea, and I'll give a mashal for it. Think of a person playing on an important team in the NBA championship game, as opposed to a regular mid-season game when you already clinched the playoff position. During the championships or the playoffs, the adrenaline is pumping, everyone's watching, everything counts over here. You reserve your strength, everyone's at thrill, and you do your best. You actually are able to do things you can't believe you're able to do, thanks to this miracle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did of adrenaline. That was the Akeidah. The Akeidah, Avram knew he was being tested. He knew this is it. Hashem's direct command. 3 days he was walking toward Har Moriah, the dramatic tension building, the adrenaline was flowing. However, what about just buying a burial spot in Machpelah? Yes, it wasn't his best days. His wife just passed away. Probably a very unpleasant negotiation. He was being frustrated. No adrenaline pumping, just frustration. Yet Avram passed this test perfectly, as the Gemara in Bava Basra says. Despite purchasing the land that was already promised to him, he did not question Hashem's ways. A lot of times when you're being tested, and you know you're being tested, and you have the adrenaline pumping and you know every second counts, and this is it, this is the money ball, that's when you're actually able to persevere and do well. However, it's the day-to-day ordinary scenes, ordinary frustrations, when no one's really watching, no one's zooming into your every act. How you act during those times, that really reveals what a big person you are. This reminds me of a famous Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler brings down the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara over there says that Rabbi Chanina ben Tardyon was teaching Torah publicly during the times of the Romans, when they didn't allow a person to learn Torah, let alone teach Torah. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma went to visit him, and he said, What are you doing? Don't you know that the Roman Empire was given power by HaKadosh Baruch Hu? They destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, killed a lot of tzaddikim, and they're still alive and kicking and running the world. And you're sitting and teaching Torah publicly? How can you do that? They're gonna kill you. Rabbi Chanina calmly responded, Hashem Yazor, Hashem will have mercy on me. Rabbi Yossi was not impressed with this answer, because he feared for Rabbi Chanina's life. However, the key part I want to share with you is, later, Rabbi Chanina asks Rabbi Yossi, who just came to visit him, Rabbi Chanina ben Tardyon asked Rabbi Yossi, by the way, do you think I'll have a good portion of Olam Haba? So Rabbi Yossi asks him, well, tell me something special you did lately. And he responded, once, the money, my own private money that I had for a Suda, got mixed up with tzedakah money that I collected for the poor. And since I wasn't sure which coins were which, I just gave it all to the poor, to tzedakah. And the astonishing response was Rabbi Yossi said, what? If so, if that's how you acted, wow. I wish my portion will be like yours. Eliyahu Dessler asks, I don't understand. Rabbi Yossi saw that Rabbi Chanina ben Tardyon was willing to give up his life to teach Torah. He knows that the whole world is run on Torah. And Rabbi Chanina ben Tardyon is willing to do an act of Mesirus Nefesh. And yet he says, well, tell me something you went through. Why is he asking Bichlal? And how come, based on the answer, he says, wow, you're going to have a huge chelik in Olam Haba. I wish I had your chelik. It was just an ordinary scene where some money got mixed up and he said, I'll give it all to tzedakah. The answer is exactly the concept we're saying. There was nothing dramatic about the money getting mixed up. No one's really watching him. So his reflex was to do that act. That screams out, wow. No adrenaline pumping, no thriller ride, no, wow, this is it. This is such an important thing I'm doing. It was just a natural act of doing the right thing. That shows what a big person he was. And the same was with Avraham Avinu during this scene. And that is perhaps what Rabbeinu Yonah is telling us. I would like to end with not a story, but something from my personal history. When I went to yeshiva in Bnei Brak in Tivot Olam, of Kamenetz, who was a big person. It was unbelievable how he taught us, the deep level of Gemara he taught us. But the beautiful aspect about him was his ben adam lechaveroi, and the way you see that his life revolved around what does a Kadosh Baruch Hu want me to do. And the one thing that sticks in my mind that he continues to do, and anyone that saw him do this, it had a ripple effect on them, is Asher Yatzar. After when he came out of the washroom, no matter what, he stood still, as if a Kadosh Baruch Hu was right there, which he is, and he said word by word slowly. He had a lineup of 6 people wanting to ask him about the shir he gave over, but it didn't matter. He didn't think he was being watched, but we all watched him, because it was an amazing thing to see, day in, day out, saying a very important bracha, but you don't feel it's so important. Asher Yatzar, okay, I just went to the washroom. It's not like I'm giving a shir to 100 people. But it didn't matter whether he was giving a shir to 100 people and the adrenaline's pumping, or whether he's saying Asher Yatzar between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was all the same. And that is what really reveals what a big gadol a person he was. Yeh Ratzon, that will take this idea and realize life is not only about those extreme situations we have once in a while, but rather those very simple, perhaps frustrating situations that come almost every day. Have a good Shabbat.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yonah Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.